So you're trying to intimidate me? You're acting like a bully. You're trying to get under my skin. My patience is wearing thin. And you're taunting me! And you're taunting me! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it! Stop it right now! Stop it! Stop it right now!
Welcome to atRecovery. This is Johnny B, and these are my opinions. Hey, so, yeah, I was going to say, like, hey, everybody, but I think that's a little optimistic these days. Anyways, today I wanted to talk a little bit about one of the cores of the fellowships, or one of the pillars of the fellowship, and that's sponsorship. And I think that a lot of people who are atheists have a hard time with this concept of sponsorship and finding a sponsor, and how do I know what to look for in a sponsor. And these are just some of the things that I've found that help me, and I thought I would pass some of these observations on to see if they help anybody else. Some of these opinions are a little harsh, but they work for me, and they have allowed me to gain, the clean time that I have and the relative amount of sanity that I have in my life. So my whole purpose in this is that hopefully somebody might actually get something out of all of this. So, first off, I wanted to go ahead and talk about, what is a sponsor and what is the role of a sponsor, especially if you're new or even if you've been around for a while. This is not a question that's ever really addressed, I think, to where it makes sense to an atheist. A sponsor is somebody who leads you through the steps and blah, 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 blah. One of the things that I have a problem with is in the fellowship is what I call platitudes, which are things that people say. And then if you kind of go, can you explain that a little bit more? They're like, no. So a sponsorship is somebody who leads you through the steps. Well, yes and no, and a sponsorship shouldn't be your friend, and a sponsorship should be your friend, and a blah, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha. It gets really confusing, especially for atheists. So I'm going to go through, but, I do want to emphasize one of the things that I think happens to people who are atheists in the fellowships is that they don't find a sponsor they can connect with, and then they don't utilize the sponsor. Then when they relapse or they go back out, they're like, well, I don't know what happened. And it's because, well, you picked a sponsor that doesn't really have any idea how to help you or how to relate to you in a way that's helpful. I guess that's a better way to phrase it. For me, a sponsor can be somebody inside the fellowship. Most likely it will be. If you can't find somebody inside the fellowship, there's certain steps that you kind of need somebody else to talk to you about or to work with you on. And so maybe a mentor, therapist, professor, or a friend, that somebody that you would want to emulate, and we all have those people in our lives, and it's really beneficial because it adds to that component of respect, and you really have to respect a sponsor in order to really listen to what they're going to tell you. You also want somebody who actually knows who they are and can explain who they are to you in I would say, a less than superficial terms. Look at, like, does that guy really seem to know who he is? Is he hyper defensive? Does he seem to kind of want other people's respect? Or does he seem to be okay with who he is and what he's doing for the most part? Doesn't have to put on airs. And then someone who shares your beliefs. Someone who, an example I have is someone who believes that homosexuality is a sin and the person should be punished for all eternity, has no business sponsoring anybody who's LGBTQ. None. Leave them alone. Leave them alone. you have no ability to help this person because there's no separating that. I'm sorry. It's going to seep out some sideways. And actually, they should probably sponsor you, in my opinion, because you're lost. Just kind of further going down that line, if you have somebody who has these beliefs and these core beliefs that you kind of don't and can't relate to, that's going to be a difficult person to have as a sponsor. So listen closely. One of the things I tell people is that a lot of people in the meetings won't outright say, hey, I'm an atheist, but when they're sharing about their problems, you'll hear them not say stuff like prayer a whole lot, and they won't talk about God a whole lot. They won't be like, well, God's grace has kept me blah blah blah, and I'm not slamming that any more than, for me, that doesn't make any sense. And so for me, when I'm looking for a sponsor who is kind of the pivot point from which the most of my recovery, especially as a new person, will come from, I need somebody I can relate to. I need somebody who kind of has some understanding of where I am, of my beliefs, of things that aren't going to work for me because they probably didn't work for them. And someone like me, and I've tried multiple types of sponsors. Most of them didn't work, and they just made me more miserable because they didn't identify with my core beliefs. I couldn't resolve them with my core beliefs. So, and then, it's very important to keep in mind that you need to have a good connection with a sponsor because you want to utilize the sponsor, of course. So the first question is, what is the goal or the purpose of the steps? I'm going to give good and bad answers to this for me as an atheist. A bad answer for me is, well, it's to form a relationship with God. Obviously, I'm an atheist. I want to remain an atheist, or I feel like it's highly unlikely that I'm not going to end up an atheist at the end of all of this. So, probably not the best answer for me. My opinions and what's worked for me for 21 years. I've never relapsed since the day I got here. I've tried different ways, and most of them ended up with me just more miserable. Another bad answer to any question generally that's really a core of the program, like the steps or sponsorship. If you ask them any of these, what is addiction? What is the disease? What is this disease concept that you keep talking about, if they do talk about it? Anybody who answers, I don't know, I just have faith in the program, that's a non-answer. That doesn't mean anything. That's like saying, blah, understood. That just means that they don't know, and you want somebody who has at least some answers for themselves. They're not going to answer your questions, but they really can't really offer you anything, and they're just going through the motions. That's not a good answer to any question that you ever ask anybody about anything that's core to the fellowships. Now, some good answers that I've heard in the past is to address the past and move forward. That's a good answer for the steps. I want to address the past and I want to move forward. To learn how to better experience life. When I got here, life seemed really empty and vapid and two-dimensional, but now I've experienced life in a more fuller way. To form better and more enriching relationships with people. That's another purpose of the steps, in my opinion, is that it helps you form better, more enriching, honest relationships with people. To deepen my level of self-acceptance. Yeah, if you work the steps, you're going to be faced with yourself, and you're going to, in my opinion, this is a great answer, because in my opinion, you're going to have to learn to accept yourself. Now, one of the ways that I would say a religious person would work the steps, and when I say religious, I mean an individual with a belief in a God, which is the definition of religion, is that they'll say, well, I know that God forgives me. That's why I accept myself. Not going to work for an atheist. I just replaced my opinion of myself with God's opinion of myself. Well, what if God doesn't like you? You don't know. You never met him. So that's not an answer for an atheist. And I guarantee you, if you're an atheist, if you're like an atheist by default, I don't know. But if you actually demand some type of evidence and logic and reason behind things, that answer is never going to be sufficient for you. So it's about really trying to learn to love myself, to have self-acceptance, and in turn, learn how to love other people. I do. I may talk about people that are religious, but, it doesn't mean I don't love them. They're not someone I'm going to go to for a lot of solution about the meaning of life and the universe and everything. Question number 2. What is the definition between my will and God's will? And the answer I'm not too fond of is that my will is selfish and self-seeking. I guess I say, and then God's will is selfless. Now, at this point, if you say, well, what does that look like? So I'm supposed to spend all of my time going out, and that's one of my favorite phrases, what does that look like? So I should go out and just give all my money away. Well, no. Oh, well, if I own a company, then I should pay people as much as I can afford to, so that it's fair. Well, no. So nothing. It means nothing? Is that what I'm hearing here? It's what I'm hearing. It's just not. It's not an answer that works for me. Okay, another answer I'm not real fond of is my will is destructive. That's a terrible thing to say to somebody. Yeah, your will is destructive. Well, that wasn't my intention to destroy things. I just don't know what to do to not destroy things. No one ever taught me anything. There's a lot more to it than that, but this is just a brief, one over about things to ask. So some answers that I like. You're a good person. Your true will is probably good. I honestly believe human beings are social creatures, and so therefore good, which generally we refer to as selflessness, is inherent in our genetics. Our society has developed to a culture that is very selfish, and that's why people do drugs. But I could go into that more in a later time. I personally believe that the two types of will that we really need to talk about is fear-based will, or fear-based behaviors, versus free will, or fearless behaviors. And obviously, I'm not talking about like, I'm going to march out into the middle of the street with all the cars going everywhere and it'll be just fine. I'm talking about stupid person will behaviors. I'm talking about like, well, I kind of like that girl and I should ask her out, but then she'll probably divorce me. And if I had any money, which I don't, she would probably take everything and then I'd be suicidal and I'd probably kill myself or do lots of drugs and kill myself. So I shouldn't ask her out. That's fear-based, and that's generally what gets us in trouble. We try to negotiate with this fear-based will as opposed to just exposing it for what it is. And when you examine what your will really was initially, you'll realize that your will probably is not as selfish as you made it out to be or that you think it is. Another question you can ask, this is number 3. Is what about traditional ideas of success, or what does success look like? Some of the bad things that I've heard in the past that don't really ring true for me is you will get those things if you work the steps. Now, these things I mean is like money and a career and a car and a gorgeous wife and 2.5 kids and a dog and a picket fence. All your materialistic dreams will come true because that brings happiness for some strange reason. Another thing that I hear that's along the same exact lines as that is, when I got here, I had nothing. And now I have scads of cash and a great career. I don't care. To be honest with you, that's not my interpretation of success. So you just love your job and you love your life. And they're like, Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. 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 I love it. If you press them and say, oh, sure. Yeah, you've got whatever. So you must be happy all the time. And they're like, I still go to meetings. And I still show up at meetings and go, things are terrible. Yeah, because so that's not a good answer for me. And so, but that's a great question. What does success look like? And the least of my favorite answers to this is about don't dying. Don't die. Don't die. Just don't die. Don't do drugs and die, and then you're a success. I mean, that's kind of setting the bar a little low, in my opinion. If you're breathing, then you're a success. No. Because if you're breathing but you wish you were dead, then maybe you need to work a little bit harder on defining what it is that's success. Maybe you're already succeeding. This definition doesn't really fit what you really believe is success. And that's another conversation that's long and tedious and boring. Okay, some of the good answers that I have is you will see that these things are not as important as you may think they are. So some of these like, oh, well, he got a new car and I've been clean for 12 years and I've never owned a new car. Well, when do I get mine? Well, you've been clean for 12 years and you'll get yours when you realize what's yours is what you already have. And you're okay with that. And you realize that what he has may not bring him the joy and satisfaction that he thinks it's going to, or it may, but that there's not this direct correlation between material success or outward success and that feeling of being a success, of liking what I've done and achieved in my life. Another answer I like is that the steps do not address that, but in discovering who you are, you may discover what success looks like for you. And another one is what is a day of serenity worth monetarily? Another question that's really good, and you might really want to ask somebody you're considering to be your sponsor is, say I'm struggling and I don't have a belief in God. What should I do? These are the bad answers you might get as an atheist. Pray to a light bulb. Because the light bulb, when you turn it on, if you were just sad about being in the dark, then it's fixed. Now, just believe that I believe. Well, what if I believe that your belief is not founded in anything real and that you're just deluding yourself? Does that still count, that I believe that you believe? Because I still believe you believe. Not going to work for an atheist. Act as if you believe. I don't even know what that means. To be perfectly honest with you, that makes no sense whatsoever. There's no congruency in that statement. The only way you can act as if you believe something is if you actually believe it, because belief is not an action. So, yeah, that no. Anything at all that involves mysticism, prayer, going to church, anything that you believe that if you put this energy, quote unquote, out into the universe, and I'm not talking about like being a positive person and getting positive things back. That's totally different. That's another long story, but it's totally different. I'm talking about people who literally believe that if I pray to stay clean, then I stayed clean because I prayed to stay clean. Because most anybody that's been around for a while knows that that's not how it works. You stay clean by not doing dope and by not drinking. You find serenity by doing the work. Or serenity or inner peace or whatever the hell you want to call it. But it is not achieved through prayer alone. Prayer is just a mechanism that I can go into, and I will go into in the future. What is prayer? But for now, praying is not helpful. And telling you to pray about it is not helpful if you're an atheist. And if they know you're an atheist, it's actually just downright insulting. Because it's like, well, I can't because there's nothing to pray to. And then they go, what do you mean? Play. And you're like, what? I couldn't understand you with all that food in your mouth. And a further thing that you hear a lot is go to a meeting and share about it. Now, that's questionable advice. Now, if you've been to the meeting before and you're like, well, these people are fairly supportive and they're fairly accepting and they're not very dogmatic and they're not very, what's the word? Fundamentalist, where, you know, they're going to give you one answer, and if you don't like it, they're just going to go, well, then you keep being miserable. Then, yeah, that's it's not going to work either, is it? So going to a meeting and sharing about it might be a good idea, but a lot of times it's not a good idea. It's a bad idea. It's not good. Some good things that I've heard before: mindfulness. Mindfulness is the ability to kind of be now. Meditation is not mysticism. So if someone says, well, you could, you know, just sit down and meditate about it, another thing, there's another topic. Write about it and examine if it's rational and not emotional. Because a lot of times you can talk back to your emotions once you've looked at something rationally. Like, is things really bad? Am I being emotional about something that doesn't need to involve as much emotion as I'm putting into it? Or is the emotion just not even about what I'm looking at, and it's about something else? That's the thing about unexamined emotions, is that they have a tendency to be very, very deceptive. I also say have a list of people and helplines that are handy to you at all times, or maybe a list of things that you can do. Go for a walk, knit a sweater, watch Arrested Development, whatever it is. Have a list of things, because I know that when I'm in that situation, it's hard for me to think of things. And, you know, of course, when we're in a good mood, it's hard for us to like think I should write down something. So I kind of generally make it as an assignment. And then lastly, if all else fails, then find purpose for your pain. That's how a lot of Holocaust survivors got through the Holocaust. So if they can do it, then I think probably it's pretty, good. Okay, and the final question: what gives your life meaning? Do you feel like you are making the most of your life? Do you? You know, is that what we all want out of life? Is to find ways to give it more meaning and make it feel like there's more meaning to the meaning. Meaning, that's what we want. We're afraid that our lives are meaningless and that it's just floating from one rush of adrenaline and endorphins to the next. Most addicts, we just discovered the best way to do it. You just do dope. Yeah, you know, there is a depth, there's a deeper sense of meaning, and you have to discover that for yourself. In my opinion, this whole question is really a case by case, because what I'm looking for when I talk to somebody is whether or not we're on the same wavelength. If he says something or she says something and I'm just like, wow, yeah, man, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to get. I want to get that. I want to get whatever that you just said that doesn't make any sense to me. I want you to help that make sense to me. Because that's where I want to be. How do you do this? How do you do life and not make it feel like a chore? That's what I want before I freaking die. You know, I don't want to be on my deathbed and going, thank God it's over. I mean, that's a little extreme, but I think you get my gist. So this is a case by case, because everyone's different. Everyone, I believe, you know, one of the great things about Taoism and Buddhism is that everybody has their own path, you know, and there's like the warrior path, and there's like the politician path, and there's like the spiritual, you know, advisor path, and there's, you know, everyone kind of has their own path. And I mean, I was just making up types of paths, but that you find your own path, you find somebody who's on that path, who might be a little bit ahead of you on that path, and that would make a really good sponsor. I will tell you that the acquiring of material and money is not a path. That's not a path. All those things are tools to allow you to go to be on a path. If you want to be a philanthropist, or if you want to travel the world, you're going to need money. Those are noble paths that require money. Or if you want to help people, or if you want to create art, whatever. There's a lot of things you can do. Money inherently isn't bad. It's just whether or not we use it with some type of purpose or meaning. And most people who acquire money, and they continue to acquire money, it's because they think that money in and of itself, like Ebenezer Scrooge, is the purpose of money. It's like gluttony. So that's a good way for me to find meaning in life. A couple of sayings that I usually, tip my ear for is, what gives my life meaning? Well, I feel more connected to people. I experience things, and I experience what other people are going through. I'm more connected. I think as a human being, that is something that's in our nature, and it's ingrained in our nature, and so we have to discover our nature and return to our nature. Did I say nature enough? Secondly, I'm not always happy. I'm not always happy, but I feel my life has purpose. You want to avoid the people that are like, oh, just when I'm down and I'm sad, that means that I'm doing something wrong. That's going to be kind of something that's a staple in this, in my interpretation of the journey of the 12 steps, is that needs to go away. That's like, and when I go work out, if it hurts when I, like, even a little bit, when I lift something up, I know I'm lifting it wrong, and I should just put it down because it hurts, and the hurt is telling me to not hurt. Put it down. Couple of things to avoid. A couple of things that you might want to avoid is, my life is better than I deserve. That's not a good answer for me. It's like, well, then you should probably donate all of it to someone who deserves it, don't you think? Or that's not, otherwise it's not a just universe. Unless you're just flapping your gums and you don't really believe it. But all of this, like, self-deprecation. If I got what I deserved, I would be dead. Well, then you should... What? No. Shut up. This is dumb. I live by grace alone. That's another one of my favorites. I live by grace alone. Oh, so you don't do anything. You just lay there and wait for things to come to you. Because that's grace. Grace, by the way, for some people who don't know, grace is when you get things that you don't deserve. And so basically everything in my life I don't deserve. Personally, everything in my life I deserve. I just kind of make it that way. I've worked for it. I've done things for it. I deserve it. Even if someone gave it to me, I deserve it. That sounds really conceited, but the opposite of that is very self-deprecating and very harmful. Because now you're looking at things around you, like your shelter and your food, and you're like, I deserve to be hungry and homeless. And that's not good. Granted, maybe it gives you this attitude of false gratitude, but it's not real. Most people have done stuff in order to get to where they are. I stay clean out of grace alone, and I stay sober out of grace alone, and it's grace by God. Don't get anything wrong. Nobody else in this universe is going to give you grace. No, not very often. Nobody's going to say, hey, man, come live at this house for free. So the only thing that can give you grace is some type of authoritarian figure that has control over everything in your environment. And then he can manipulate that environment in order to give you things that you did not actually earn. And that is grace. Anyone that says that I worked for everything I have, but I live by grace alone, is really confused, because you can't say both things. They're mutually exclusive. So that's something I stay away from. And one of the best ways to look at this is think about what a child would say. A child might say, I live by grace alone, because they're at the mercy of their parents. They literally live by grace, by the grace of their parents. And their parents give them everything that they need and some things that they want. but it's given to them because that's their offspring, and that's their legacy, and that's part of the parents' genetics, is to provide for their offspring. It's just kind of in your genes. And children have no real power. It's not like you can go, all right, little man, you're 4 years old. You need to get out there and get a job because I ain't putting up with this, pooping in your pants anymore. I mean, seriously, children have no ability to take care of themselves. Even if they literally had the strength, they don't have the mental acuity that our society demands. Now, yeah, you could send them out into a tribal community where they just have to chuck spears at things that are moving and gauge how fast they're moving, but our society needs you to be able to control your emotions so you're not overly emotional in wrong areas. At least it used to, where you're not like screaming at people because I didn't get things my way. But you're actually what's called civilized and polite society. That is a social contract that takes a while to develop, and usually it's not until the individual's in their 20s that they can actually really fully function in society if they've been raised properly, which almost never happens in this culture. So when people are saying, oh, well, everything, I've lived by grace alone, and this is not my doing, they're children. Or they're full of crap, and they're just saying that because it makes them appear humble. Now, they also, in my opinion, haven't worked the steps, because the steps, what I believe, are a transformative experience that allows you to go from the child state to the adult state. That's the whole purpose of the steps. The things that they don't like, is adults take responsibility. They take responsibility for their emotional state. They don't say, well, you're making me feel bad. Or what you said made me angry. No, you got angry about what I said. My intention was not generally to make you angry, because I don't go around just making people angry for no reason. Because I don't, because I'm not a child. What I said was probably my opinion, and you didn't agree with it, and that made you say it. So adults take responsibility for their emotions. They take responsibility for where they are. And therefore, they know that they're worthy of what they've achieved and what they've become. And it's really kind of bizarre to me that a lot of fundamentals will also have this mentality of you get what you work for, which is total counterintuitive to the idea of grace. And so the level that you're going to find, and what you're really trying to look for, in my opinion, in a sponsor, is you want to make sure that these points, that these areas where there's this cognitive dissonance, that the steps are designed to attack and point out that the reason why you're having problems is because you live in this state of flux and cognitive dissonance, and that you live in compartments, and that there's no integrity. The AA literature says, to thine own self be true. And then somehow that got perversed into, we live a program of complete honesty. That's a bunch of crap. Nobody does. But the thing is that they think they're completely honest because they've gotten better at lying to themselves. At least the individuals that I hear this the most out of. Well, I need to be completely honest. Well, wait, didn't you just get in trouble for tax evasion? Did you not know that you were not paying your taxes? Shut up. Well, I'm not perfect. Well, then stop saying that you work a program of complete honesty. Our culture abhors complete honesty. You can't be completely honest in this culture, or you'll lose your freaking job if you actually work for somebody. And the people that say they do, they're. I believe, once again, what I believe, is that the only way you're going to work this program is if you work it with somebody that you have respect for, and you work it with somebody that you trust, and you work it with somebody you can relate to, and all of that boils down to, when you find a sponsor and when you're picking a sponsor, that sponsor needs to be somebody that you have all these things for. And then when if you start working with them and you're like, you know what? Some of the things you're saying, I'm not really seeing you do. And you have a lot of inconsistencies and you have a lot of compartmentalization. You know, you say, well, I don't understand. We should not be judgmental, but that you go around judging people or whatever it is. Anyways, you know, in my opinion, you need to find somebody that you can work with. You need to really kind of flush out who they are as an individual. If you work with them for a while and you find out that, wow, this is not working out because we don't have the same ideals and we don't even have the same reality, then, you know, it's okay to get rid of that person and try to find a new person. That's okay. I encourage it. I've gone through several sponsors, and some of them I've literally like just walked away and just been like, wow, that guy's lost. And he's adamant that he's not, that he has the answers. And that's probably why he's lost, because he never questions whether or not he has the answers. And that happens not only in religions, but also in recovery, which is supposed to not be a religion, which means you don't have to believe in God. Because the definition of a religion is believing in God. It has to have that. It's something that requires a belief in God. So if you're working with a sponsor that's religious and you're an atheist, you may want to find somebody else. Just my opinion. And here's some places that you can start. And just find and some enjoyment and some purpose and some meaning and whatever. Anyways, once again, those were my opinions. If you're on YouTube, please like, subscribe, do all that fun stuff. I'm gonna try to release these on Wednesdays, and we'll see how that goes. My dog is literally trying to break down the door, so I'm gonna have to wrap this up. But as always, have a wonderful, wonderful day.
Kid, other side is something big. You think that what you did would bring you back to this?